Despite the menacing weather and bitter cold, 600 friends, colleagues, Nobel laureates, politicians, generals, and acquaintances from all walks of life gathered to mourn the death of a true American hero. It was a bittersweet moment as each individual recollected their personal engagement with this utterly fascinating individual, whose life embodied both triumph and tragedy in epic proportions. He was a man who was credited to have ended the war in the Pacific, a brilliant manager who was the principal architect responsible for the success of the Manhattan Project, an American hero soon to face the unjust humiliation perpetrated by those who were racing towards an eventual Cold War, as an ungrateful nation stood in acquiescing silence. This is the story of one of the most brilliant scientists theoretical physics has ever seen. The story of a man whose keen intellect triumphantly helped harness atomic power, but unwittingly led to the tragic murder of over 130,000 Japanese civilians. This is the tragic story of J. Robert Oppenheimer. Oppenheimer was born on April 22, 1904. He was educated in the Ethical Culture School in New York and mastered Harvard's curriculum in 3 years. He was fluent in 6 languages, some that even mastered in a few months, and seriously considered becoming an architect or a poet. His exposure to the brightest minds while at Cambridge and Göttingen piqued his love for physics, and soon endeared all who came to know him as the eccentric young American who could devour theoretical physics as well as 16th century French poetry with equal ferocity. Ironically, he was amazingly naive when it came to the social or practical world around him. His early life was focused largely on intellectual pursuits. At age 25, he accepted a professorship at the University of California at Berkeley and Caltech in Pasadena. December 2nd, 1941, the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor. Previously warned by Leo Szilard and Albert Einstein about the German atomic program, President Roosevelt swiftly declared war on Japan and initiated the Manhattan Project, code name for the U.S. atomic bomb development, administered by General Leslie R. Groves. General Groves chose Oppenheimer to lead this effort. At first, this seemed like a curious choice, since Oppenheimer was known to be too temperamental to run even a hot dog stand, and was well known to have innocently flirted with the communist movement in his early days. But Oppenheimer was a brilliant choice because of the simple fact that he comprehended all aspects of the task, from engineering to chemistry, not just physics. He successfully marshaled the most eclectic collection of scientists and technicians at Los Alamos, New Mexico. 28 months and $30 billion later, the bomb nicknamed the Gadget was tested at 5:30 a.m., July 16th, 1945. The test was a resounding success. Almost immediately, Oppenheimer began to have uneasy thoughts about what had just been accomplished. His initial reservations and objections weren't vocal enough to stop the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, which proceeded swiftly as planned. The triumphant success of the Manhattan Project quickly morphed into one of the most horrible human tragedies, deliberately unleashed on a large civilian population. Oppenheimer's deep remorse about the tragic human toll in Hiroshima and Nagasaki swiftly triggered a passionate, outspoken opposition against further development of atomic armaments. This quickly drew him in the crossfire of critics and hawks within President Eisenhower as well as Truman's administrations. Oppenheimer felt that he had blood on his hands.
We knew the world would not be the same. Few people laughed. Few people cried. Most people were silent. remembered the line from the Hindu scripture, the Bhagavad Gita. Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds.
History shows speed to be the defining feature of most technological advances. Samuel Morse's telegraph, and more recently the internet, a product that ironically came from our paranoia of a Russian atomic attack, allow a message to transmit in seconds instead of weeks. People in the 1840s literally spoke of railroad travel in terms of annihilation of time and space. Oppenheimer's development of the atomic bomb, in a similar way, showed the possibility of annihilating an entire city in just 9 seconds. What has been much slower to change is the collective behavior of a poorly informed people at large. Partisan politics and a press focused mostly on irrelevant sensational stories has hardly changed since the 1800s. Precious few make us stop and think about the inconvenient truths of the day. Lacking access to institutional secrets, the public deals mostly with fear, a Russian attack then, and terrorism today. History alone seems to be the only sure tool available for the lay public to make sense of their current world. While the atomic bomb may have put a sudden stop to the war with Japan, it was the Marshall Plan that provided the most powerful antidote. It's no wonder that Japan is one of the United States' most prosperous and close ally today. Oppenheimer's story also took place largely shrouded from the public. It was about a government's decision to move to a new and deadlier level of nuclear arms without fully telling the American people. When the balance tips too far from either logic, truth, or moral underpinning, one runs into the danger of changing what we cherish the most. What makes America what it is today. The unbridled influence of Louis Strauss and McCarthy's irrational hunt for communist spies unjustly entangled a humane intellectual giant like Oppenheimer. They resort to the closed-door hearings, illegal FBI wiretapping, and witness intimidation, an extraordinary display of ingratitude to a man whom the nation owed so much. Most of all, it deprived the American public from hearing a much-needed rational debate. The nation thus stood by silently. The 1946 Senate hearing reflects Oppenheimer's deep insight. When asked how he would go about protecting New York from an atomic bomb attack, Oppenheimer famously quipped, with the screwdriver, to open each and every suitcase. In the post-9/11 era, we call it a dirty bomb. Robert Oppenheimer's colorful life serves as a powerful story to recap and relearn from. George Kennan, a veteran diplomat and longtime friend of Oppenheimer, recalls in his eulogy about an exchange with this dear friend. When reminded that his brilliance would have been welcomed in hundreds of academies abroad, and whether he had thought of taking residence outside of this country, Oppenheimer responded with tears in his eyes, "Damn it, I happen to love this country."